To see her, and appreciate Keith and Fred contributing at the last minute. Okay, we're going to carry on our study of heaven. John 14, 1 through 3, do not let your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. But if not, I would have told you, because I am going away to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. Here Jesus is referring to that final resting place for Christians. He said there are many dwelling places, which we discussed last time. We looked at the size, the picture we have of the size of heaven. It's being prepared for us. So whatever it's going to be like, it's going to perfectly suit us. And we are going to be in the presence of God when we do get there. Now, I want to have a look at probably the most comprehensive vision we have of heaven itself. It's hard to say whether this is just a vision that John had, or it is based on what we'll actually find when we get there. Maybe a combination of both things, I don't know. But I don't see why, to some extent, a lot of these things shouldn't be true. As we go through this, and it's Revelations 21 through to Revelation 22:5, I want you to try and imagine what's actually being described here. And in general, it is a description of what heaven will be like physically. Starting in verse 1 of Revelation 21. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea did not exist any longer. So after this world perishes, is destroyed, then God is going to replace it with this new heaven and the new earth, which he calls it. I think the new heaven and the new earth is just a term for this new spiritual realm which we're going to go to. And I saw the holy city. So here, heaven, or that last resting place for the soul, is called the holy city. It's also called New Jerusalem. So there are actually a number of terms used to describe it. And it says, coming down out of heaven from God. Or heaven from God, meaning it's coming down from the seat of God. And then it says, prepared like a bride ordained for her husband. Interestingly, in this case, this holy city, or the New Jerusalem, is described as being like a bride. This has pretty much always been the case. Usually when you go to a wedding, I know it's not 100%, but in general, the spectacular looking one is the bride. For us, she's got a beautiful dress. She may have a veil, or she may have a tiara. She's got flowers. And the groom is sitting there with a black suit. I mean, he looks sharp, but he's not at the same level as the bride is. And I know in other countries, they may not use white, but still the bride is generally the most spectacular one. I think that's what's trying to get across here. When we finally come to this new home, which is waiting for us, it truly is going to be spectacular. But it's not only going to be spectacular for that one day, it's going to be like that for the whole time we're there, meaning eternity. So prepared like a bride, adorned for her husband. And I'm not quite sure who the husband is there. The wording, it seems to be Christians, but I'm not totally sure. And then he said, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling of God is with humanity, and he will take up residence with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them. To me, that's a very beautiful thing. What our life is all about is waiting for that time when we can actually be with God in a much closer sense than we are now. We can have a relationship with God now, but we can't see him. We can't talk to him in the sense that we will be able to then. So we will have a very close and intimate relationship with God himself. I've called this section the arrival of the bride. And that's really what it's talking about. When this holy city comes down and the Christians in this holy city gather together. Now the next section, he has a little bit on the benefits of being individually, the benefits of being part of this new holy city. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. When you see what we're going to be able to experience in this new city, it's really quite tremendous. Sometimes tears are beneficial, but the vast majority of the cases, we're crying because of some way that we are seriously suffering. So there'll be no suffering. And related to the next one, I think, and death will not exist any longer. When people die, although if they're Christians, we can be happy for them, but still, it's hard on us when they go, when we've been friends for years. Maybe when parents leave, when they die, or a close friend, or someone's killed in a road accident, or even when someone's famous that we don't even know and they die. It's quite a shock to us very often. But there'll be nothing like that in this new place that we're going to go and live. And mourning or wailing or pain will not exist any longer. Just seems to me that, if we could just enjoy life all the time, I think that would be a wonderful thing. But that's what we're promised here. And notice he said the former things have passed away. That was part of the old life. The new life is something that's going to be very different. Okay, the next section, verse 5. I think God is trying to give us confidence that this really does exist. It's something we can absolutely believe in. Verse 5, and the one seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. So here God, if in a sense, intercedes and tells John these words. I am making all things new. This new heaven, the new Jerusalem, the new earth, etc. That's something that God himself will bring about. And he said, write, because these words are faithful and true. And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I must admit, when I think about these words, I think of Sandra. She's in hospital, more than likely very close to death. And yet she seems to have absolute confidence that what's waiting for her out the other side is worth every suffering and pain she experiences now. To me, that's one of the best things we can gain from Christianity. Being a Christian's no good if you're not really sure it's true. And I know there are quite a few people who are Christians, but it's more out of hope than out of real faith that such a thing exists. I think God here is trying to convince us that we can absolutely believe in this. We can be totally sure that when that final day comes and Jesus returns and we get to experience this city, that it will be like he's talking about here. It will be a wonderful place for us to exist in. If we can go through life totally believing that, I really believe that'll transform our life. Any degree of doubt, while it may not be wrong, it does reduce the joy we can have as Christians. Now the next part, a little bit different. He gives what I've called it 2 requirements of entry. And this is something we can work on now. To the one who is thirsty, I will give water from the spring of the water of life freely. The spring of the water of life, probably the implication is there as we gain eternal life because of it. But notice the one who is thirsty. And we looked in the class being hunger and thirst after righteousness. The one who truly wants what God has available to us. God will give eternal life freely, willingly, lovingly. But if we just go through life as a mediocre Christian, that may not happen quite the same. Said if you're lukewarm, he will spit us out. I think it is important for us to try to be really enthusiastic about being Christians and really committed Christians. The second one, the one who conquers will inherit these things. Now, the idea of conquer brings up to me a vision of some of the Roman armies going against the Germanic tribes. There's a movie called Gladiator, and the beginning scene is the Germanic tribes are on one side of the hill in the trees, and the Roman soldiers are all lined up on the other side, and they're getting ready to have a huge battle. Conquer always means to go against difficulties. Conquer doesn't mean something falls in our lap. Conquer means we will face difficulties and will have what is needed to overcome those difficulties and come out the other side victorious over whatever those problems were. I think it does indicate Christianity is going to be to some extent difficult for us. We'll have opposition. We talked about that also this morning, talking about people persecuting us. Nothing wrong with that. That's a testing ground for our faith. The one who conquers will inherit these things. If we're timid, if we are cowards, like it says in the next point, we don't stand up for Christ, then we really don't deserve what God is making available to us. Notice from verse 8, and this really lists those who are not permitted in, the opposite of that last group. But as for the cowards and unbelievers and detestable persons and murderers and sexually immoral people and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their share is in the lake that burns with fire and sulphur, which is the second death. So on the one hand, those who hunger and thirst after righteousness will receive the inheritance. Those who are conquerors, in a Christian sense, will receive the inheritance. But those who are unrighteous, very clearly what they will receive is this lake of fire, which we usually call hell, punishment for eternity. And notice this lake of fire he calls the second death. The first death is our physical death. The first death would be this punishment we would receive, which is really the opposite to life. It's not saying your spirit ceases to exist, but it's the opposite to life. Life is eternal joy. Death is eternal punishment. Okay, then we get on to a section which is more of a description of this New Jerusalem in a physical sense. He looks at the outside of the city, then the dimensions of the city, the materials of the city, and then the inside of the city. So he gives quite a comprehensive description of what this place, which we've come to call heaven, is going to be like. He starts with the outside. When I was reading this, I couldn't help thinking of one time, I believe we were in Albania and we were driving down to Greece, and we came up over a bit of a hill, and in the distance you could see, all we could see was the glow of the city. It was quite spectacular. I can't remember which city it was. But as we got closer and closer, the glow sort of increased. But then as we got more close, you could see what the city was. It wasn't that great, actually. But the glow of it, that you'd see as you first come over the hill, and as that glow kind of increased as you got closer, was really quite spectacular. That's kind of the image he's trying to convey in this section. As we approach this heaven, what are we going to see? And all of this description is really spectacular. Starting in verse 9. And one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. So this angel that's, if you like, bringing this vision to John, now he's going to concentrate on the city itself. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and lofty mountain, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. Or possibly they're coming into existence. It's appearing as he looks into heaven. verse 11, that has the glory of God. When you think of that, there are some different things around the world which when you look at them, you really could talk about them as being full of glory. Some of the palaces we went in overseas, they were just really spectacular. I think glory is in the attitude we have towards some things. It's the beauty of the thing itself, but it's also our appreciation of them. Some people will go to something which to me had great glory and they'd just think it was a waste of money. Why spend all that money on such a thing? They don't appreciate it all. Here, I think the idea is not only does God have glory, but we will appreciate it. When we come in his presence, we will truly appreciate the situation we are in. And then second part of verse 11, its radiance is like a precious stone. You know, if you look at a giant diamond, a giant ruby, you know, you really appreciate what you've got in your hands, maybe worth millions. You know, some of the big diamonds are worth just incredible amounts of money. That's the idea he's trying to convey here. He said something like a jasper stone shining like crystal. It has a great and high wall that has 12 gates, the 12 gates, 12 angels, and names written on the gates, which are the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. The city seems to give credence, if you like, to both the Old Testament people who were saved and the New Testament. Here, the gates are the names of the 12 tribes, which would indicate to me that there were a reasonable number of Old Testament people who will be saved. 3 gates on every side, then down to 14, and the wall of the city has 12 foundations. 12 comes up a fair bit, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles. And on them are 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The gates and the foundations probably have some significance. The gates, if they're applied to the Jewish things, we can go through them as well, but the Jews were the ones that opened up the kingdom of heaven. They may not have done a very good job, but they got the ball rolling. So maybe the gates represent that. But the apostles were the foundation of the church. They were the ones that built the church. They had the teaching to go around, and as they taught and as people obeyed, they laid the foundation and built the church into what it is today. So there's probably a great deal of significance there. Then we've got a section on the dimensions of the city. We went over that last time. Quite a massive city. If you laid it on the earth, it's more than the length. Each wall, each side is probably more than the length of New Zealand, and it stretches way out into space. So you've got a massive structure. Plenty of room for everyone who wants to come. Then he's got another section on the outer walls, or the materials used, and I think it's the outside of the city. And the material of its walls are jasper, and the city is pure gold, similar in appearance to pure glass. The foundations of the wall of the city are adorned with every kind of precious stone. First foundation, jasper. Second, sapphire, chalcedony, emerald. You imagine sometimes you might have seen a little glory box. Maybe it's something to keep jewellery in. But on the outside, some of the quite expensive ones have all sorts of jewellery on the outside. And they are very impressive to look at. But you imagine a whole city on the outside, the walls, doors, everything covered with these fine jewels. You know, and you imagine us walking up to it, getting ready to go in through the door and looking around. Nothing on earth has anything really as spectacular as that. I think it'll be just amazing for us to see. One interesting thing here, the 12 gates are 12 pearls. I'm not sure whether that means that they're actually round pearls and you roll them out of the way to get in, or the gates are actually inlaid with pearl, so that the coating of the gates are pearl. I think probably makes a bit more sense that the gates have an inlaid pearl over them. But we'll have to wait and see when we get there. It does say each of the gates was from a single pearl, But again, I don't know. And the streets of the city, pure gold like transparent glass. I can almost imagine that. You imagine walking on really pure gold and looking down to it, and everything reflects off it, and it that's a pretty amazing looking house that we're going to, if you ask me. Now, the next part is on the inside of the city, the inside of this place we're going to. First thing you notice is I did not see a temple. The temple in the Old Testament was supposed to be where God had contact with man. It was a representative of God himself in a lot of sense, and the Holy of Holies, supposedly, that was a really special place where the high priest met God himself. We know that wasn't the case, but in a symbolic term it is. In this place that we're going to, we don't need a temple because God himself will be there. We will have an intimate association with God. And I did not see a temple in it, for the Lord God, all-powerful, is its temple. And the Lamb. And the city has no need of the sun or of the moon, that they shine on it, for the glory of God illuminates it. And its lamp is the Lamb. So day and night doesn't exist anymore, just light. And the nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. I mean, from what we know now in Christianity, we're not talking about whole nations. I think probably we're talking about Christians from all the different nations will walk in it. The kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Again, I'm not totally sure what he's meaning then, but it says we'll bring their glory into it. All the good things is what he's trying to say will be found in this place. And its gates will never be shut by day, for there will be no night, and they will bring the glory and the honour of the nations into it. I think what he's contrasting here is the fact that everything we will find in there will be good. There will be nothing detestable, nothing bad, because the next section, it talks about what will not be found in this city. And every unclean thing and one who practices detestable things and falsehood will never enter into it, except those who are written in the book of life of the Lamb. A lot of times problems we have in this life are because other people do us wrong, don't do what they should do in the way they treat us. And that very often does make life difficult. But none of that is going to be present there. Everything that's going to exist will be for our benefit, will be good for us, will be something we enjoy. Now the next section I've entitled Benefits as a Whole of Residency in Heaven. Just some of the things. And again, it's just trying to build up the huge benefit that exists for us to be part of this community that lives in this wonderful city. So chapter 22, verse 1, and he showed me the river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming out from the throne of God and of the Lamb. And again, the water of life here represents eternal life. Then in the middle of its streets and on both sides of the river is the tree of life. Now, I'm not quite sure how that works. You've got a river running down the middle of the street. We had that in Albania, but they were broken sewers. That's not going to be the case here. But also you've got trees which are on both sides of the river. So you've got the street, you've got a river down the middle, and you've got a tree, and it is in the singular, on both sides of the river. Whether that means the river goes through, you can see some trees have, the way they've grown, that you can walk through the middle of them, I don't really know what is being said there. But the emphasis is that these trees or the leaves of these trees will take away all our illnesses. So as far as life in heaven is concerned, there will be no illness. And I know we think that's self-evident, but when you think about what you go through in this life, I think that's a pretty good thing. To be able to live in such a an existence. Verse 3, and there will not be any curse any longer. Now, again, hard to say which the curse is. It could be related to the curse of illness, or it could be related to the curse of sin. My thinking is probably talking about the illness, but I'm not sure. And the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his slaves will serve him. We will be his slaves. There's nothing wrong with being a slave if that's what you love doing. The problem with slavery in the world is that people are forced to do what they don't want. We will be voluntary, willing slaves of God, and he will be a loving master. And they will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. We'll be marked as his children. We will know we are his children in everything that we do. And night will not exist any longer. And they will not have need of the light of a lamp and the light of the sun, because their God will give light to them, and they will reign forever and ever. The they there, I believe, is us. We will reign by being part of this awesome world. I don't know that we really have a word that adequately describes what's waiting for us after Jesus returns. We can say awesome, but we throw that word around pretty lightly. We can say beautiful, but again, we do that fairly lightly. It's just going to be a place that the only way we can describe it is in the terms that he has used here to describe it. But whatever it's like, it's going to be an absolutely wonderful place. Okay, to finish off, I just want to read a few little verses. We've got 5 minutes left. Matthew 10 and verse 28. And do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Don't be afraid of anything that's going to happen to you in this life. And you will have things go wrong. And some early Christians were physically killed because of their faith. But instead be afraid of the one who is able to destroy both soul and body. And he'll be afraid of the one who has the power to keep you out of this wonderful city, which we've got described here. But whether we enter it or whether we are unable to enter it totally depends on us in this life. God has done everything he needs to do to make it possible for go in. All we have to do is go along with what he has asked us to do. And then Matthew 6, verse 19 through 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and consuming insects destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor consuming insect destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The emphasis of our life should be storing up those treasures that we will receive back in heaven when we finally get there. They are the ones that have real value. Treasures we have now have very limited value. Okay, in this life, but beyond that, they have no value whatsoever. Any good we can do now, any services we can perform now, anything we can do in response to what God asks us to do will benefit us enormously in the life to come. And then the last one, 2 Peter 3, verses 11 through 13. Because all these things are being destroyed, meaning the earth, and this heaven and this earth, being destroyed in this, what sort of people must you be in holy behaviour and godliness, while waiting for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by being burned up, and the celestial bodies will melt as they are consumed by heat. But according to his promise, we are waiting for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. I hope I see all of you there. Okay, we'll just close with a word of prayer.